Hello, and the time has finally come. Now, admittedly, this is a few days after I've returned from Korea. Getting to Korea, I knew it was going to be crazy. So, I didn't film any A roll, and I just tried to film as much B roll as possible. When we left, the whole ordeal, if you could say, was going to be we were going to Taiwan first, and then heading over to Korea. So we're going to Korea via Taiwan, is the better way to put that. Our flight was at midnight of technically the 3rd, I guess, if you really want to look at it. It was our flight out was May 3rd at like 12:30 or 1 o'clock, something like that. Because of that, it meant our journey really began on May 2nd, right? The day before. And so we all got together. Ben, Lynn, and I, we were traveling together, and we went to SFO where we tried to see if we could change our seats to get closer together, and that wasn't possible. We were there about 4 hours prior to the flight. We had a lot of time at SFO. And so it was just a lot of walking around and then just sitting down and watching stuff on our phones, chatting it up, getting ready for the trip really. Once the flight started, it wasn't all that bad. For me, it was pretty normal because I'm used to staying up really late. But for Lynn and Ben, they had to really struggle to try to stay awake. I told them to stay awake until the latter part of the trip to where they could then sleep the entire time. When we land, we could just hit the ground running, so to say. And that was the plan. So we got onto the plane. The food was fine. Entertainment was pretty bad on Eva Air. Like, the movie selection was really piss poor, and although like I was just rewatching movies I've already seen, and thankfully I downloaded a ton of Netflix onto my phone just in case, and just was watching my phone. It made the first part, staying awake, really difficult for Lynn and Ben because it was like about 4 or 5 a.m. when I was like, yeah, you guys could like go to sleep now. And when we land in Taipei, we should probably just try to stay awake for that short period, and then once we take off again and come to Korea, let's go back to sleep again. All the flights were from America to Asia were actually fairly good. They're actually a little faster than we thought they would be too. So we got to Taipei, walked through security, got on to our next flight, and came to Korea pretty much issue free. The issue we ran into, or our first issue that we ran into, wasn't until we actually landed in Korea. And this is when Eva Air does some of those, like one of those airline company things that I'm not too fond of. It's when they segregate your flight from your luggage. So we didn't have any luggage. We only had carry-on, but to kind of free up space in the overhead compartments, we decided that we'd check our carry-on in. The only problem is, mine made it through just fine, but Lynn's and Ben's actually got shipped somewhere else. And Eva Air was extremely apologetic that it didn't make it, and that they would deliver it to our hotel free of charge. The only problem is that we were only in Seoul for one night before going to Chuncheon the next morning. Like, it was a pretty action-packed schedule. I was quite concerned that they wouldn't be able to get our luggage to us by the 10 p.m. deadline that they said they would. They promised that they'd get it to us by 10 p.m. If not, we're actually staying at the same hotel a few nights later, so 2 nights later, but we'll see what happens. And so we did that, and then on top of that, it just occurred to me, my buddy was picking me up from Incheon Airport, and part of the reason he was picking me up was because I had like presents for his kids, and those presents were split between my carry-on suitcase and Lynn's carry-on suitcase. So I was only able to give him half of what I was trying to give him. And he drove us to Seoul, which actually cut down the time of us traveling quite a bit, which surprised me because I thought the traffic would be much worse. But he got us right to the door of our hostel, the K-pop hostel or hotel, whatever it was called. Wasn't that fancy of a place, didn't really have that great of a check-in process. There was a dude there, which that actually did help because we stayed also at the Must Stay, which is owned by the same guy. And when we got there, it was just our name on a key. So we'll discuss that once that actually comes to the day though. We got there, checked in, I dropped off my stuff, we also linked up with Chris, our other friend, who was already in Seoul at that time. He was already staying at that hotel, so it made it really easy for us to all meet up right there. After dropping our stuff, we all went outside, said goodbye to my buddy that dropped me off. So the first thing was first, let's get some lunch. We went to Myeok Sangbang restaurant, which is a famous restaurant in Seoul that serves a specific type of bibimbap with the raw beef on top. And I know Ben was really gearing up to try that type of food. So we went there. We had that for lunch. It was amazing. And then the first thing that we were going to do after that was the Namsanggol Hanok village. We were going to take 15 minutes. If we walked, it was going to be like 17 minutes. Being that was the time difference, they decided that they wanted to walk. Now, I did give them the option. And at first they thought, oh, that's a no-brainer. Let's just walk. It's not worth spending like the 75 cents or $1 or whatever it is to take the bus for the same amount of time that we could walk. And then we walked it, and it is the Namsanggol, which means it's on Namsan, a mountain. And it was a lot of up and downs, and they were kind of like, hey, how far is this? It's like, well, it's 17 minutes away, so, it's going to take that long to get there. And they kind of started to learn at this point, okay, whenever we could take a bus or a subway, we should try to do that. Later on, we're going to learn that the cabs actually aren't all too bad as well. But again, story for another day. We did bump into something that was kind of cool on the path to the Namsanggol Hanok village. It was these art installations that actually led in a path around that part of Namsan. So it's not the entire mountain, it was just that one portion of it. And these art installations had stamps, which Lynn was always like looking for stamp rallies, and here was one of them. So she was able to go and get her stamps that she was looking for. After that, we went into the Hanok village. The Hanok village is free, which is kind of cool. We were able to walk into all these different homes and the emperor's uncles or empress's like uncles cabin or whatever, Hanok, and it was pretty interesting. Like there was the carpenter's Hanok, and they all had their differences. Like between the 3 years that I've been there, it didn't change all that much, but there was slight changes. And things that I remember being there, luckily were still there. The main one being like the ancient games in the main courtyard of the Hanok area, which both Chris and Lynn really took to trying to do. Chris actually spent the entire time trying to play that game while the rest of us actually toured the rest of the houses. And then we just joined back up and bounced out of that area to go see the time capsule that was at the top of kind of that mountain. After that, we then found out that we were kind of not too far away from the next area that we're trying to go to, which was the Namsan Tower, Seoul Tower, Namsan Seoul Tower, which is always abbreviated. I always got it mixed up with North Seoul Tower. It's just the N Seoul Tower, but it stands for Namsan. And again, we ended up walking to the Namsan Seoul Tower, which was like a really good experience for us to go and see what it was like to walk around Seoul. Now, I would say this is a very different experience in the fact that most of the rest of the Seoul that I walked around was pretty flat. Like Itaewon, I'm sorry, not Itaewon, Gangnam, Hongdae, and the Myeongdong area. They're all pretty flat. Now, there are hilly areas. Obviously, if you go to any of the mountains or any of the gates there, they're all hilly. But again, we were walking along the hill, and although it was only supposed to be a 10-minute walk, it took a lot longer than I think they expected because they weren't used to walking that. Although Lynn and I are from San Francisco, which are, our hills are considered mountains by most, Ben and Chris are actually from like Mountain View and the San Mateo area, so they're down the peninsula where it's pretty flat. And so they weren't used to that. And halfway to our Namsan Tower destination, we passed a rotisserie, like a coffee cafe that had its own rotisserie. It was like Chalet of Seoul or Seoul Chalet, something like that. And they asked if we could stop and have like a little break there, which was totally legit. So we popped into the coffee shop. I was able to get some geisha coffee, which was kind of nice. So they served high-end coffee as well. And we just chilled there for a little while before making our way to the Seoul Tower. And Seoul Tower was great. Like, it was everything you would expect from my last trip there. We went up the gondola, we went up the sideways escalator first, and then we went up the gondola. We were able to go and walk around the entire tower, kind of see all like the art installations. And I would say that out of all the areas that I thought we were going to spend time at, Seoul Tower we spent the least amount of time for the entire trip. I thought we would spend a lot longer there. We actually did not. We blew through the Lovelock area, which had the ducks. We blew through the night view area where you get to see like that pretty sight of kind of Myeongdong, I believe it is, from Seoul Tower. And then when we were at the top of the tower, I think we only spent like 20 minutes at the top before we came back down. We spent more time in line waiting to go up the elevator and down the elevator than we did doing anything else. Other than that, everything was pretty straightforward, pretty quick, and once we got back, it was like, okay, what are we going to do for dinner? We were originally going to go to UFO Burger, but that ended up, they were going to be closed before we actually got there. Or we were going to get there at like 9:45-ish, and they closed at 10, I believe is what it was. And so we kind of shifted gears, and I looked to see what else was around. And in Myeongdong, near our hotel, there was a BBQ chicken, which is some like, if not the best, fried chicken in the Seoul area. I don't know if there's something better. Write it in the comments below. I definitely will go back and try it. Anyhow, we decided, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Hopped onto a bus. After 2 times of climbing the mountain, people decided that it's better just to sit down at this point. We took the bus to Myeongdong. Got off, walked over to the chicken place, and gosh, we ordered quite a bit of chicken. At first we thought just having a single order of half and half would be enough for all of us, but we ended up actually ordering like an extra sauce chicken, an extra yum yum chicken, because it wasn't enough. Like, we were hungry, and it's the help yourself to the side condiments, so the chips, cookies, and I call them cookies, but maybe crackers, and the pickles. And then we got a couple of beers, couple of Cokes, and everything was, yeah, it was delicious. It was considerably, for the rest of the group, one of the best meals that they had while we were there. Other than that, I think that pretty much finished off the night. We went back to the hotel. I don't know if I did our room tour, but if I did, I'll fit it in right here. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and finish off the video by saying we'll see you in the next video. We'll see you tomorrow.